in a way, it is a generational thing because the generation older than us created sort of systems that weren't healthy for the planet or anything, but it's also not an entire like generation's fault.
This is The Butterfly Effect, a podcast that shows the big impact a small action can do. Tali Orad is talking to those special people that make a difference with nature and trees.
Welcome everyone to The Butterfly Effect. My name is Tali Orad. I'm your host and your butterfly here. My special guest today is Harry Justice. Harry is a senior at Berkeley Carroll School in Brooklyn, New York. He engages with environmentalism and sustainability by co-leading his school's environmental club, conducting independent science research on sustainability, and promoting advocacy and social justice through personal research and advocacy with the climate advocacy group called FXB Climate Advocates. Welcome, Harry, to The Butterfly Effect.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. You are a high school senior, and I'd like to start by talking about your academics and the school sustainability projects and research that you were involved in. Can you please share with us a little more about that?
I'm part of a 3-year program at my school that focuses on independent science research projects that each student conducts. And from the beginning, I knew I wanted to do something either related to the environment or to sustainability or both. And a topic I got really interested in was about agriculture because I found that climate was going to have a huge impact on agriculture, whether it be because of droughts, because of too much rain, because of floods, or because of decreasing soil health. But I found that that wasn't really being talked about, and I didn't really know a lot about it. And I realized that agriculture was a huge part of our society, and if it was going to start being affected and crop yields were going to go down, then that would be a huge problem for our entire planet.
So you started with that.
I started sort of general agriculture, and then I really got super interested into agronomy and soil science, and that's where it sort of took off from there, figuring out what affected soil health and how climate related to that. And I found that climate was relating to it in many different ways, and eventually my project started going towards agroforestry, which was a topic I got really excited about because it had many different potentials for not only improving soil health, improving crop yields, improving crop nutrition, but also directly related to climate. Agroforestry has a lot of potential for climate mitigation.
Mm-hmm.
Since it was hard to conduct like a soil science experiment, since soil qualities are not very dynamic, meaning that it takes a very long time to see any measurable change.
Mm-hmm.
I'm now focusing on these things called plant growth promoting rhizobacteria, which are these little bacteria in the roots of the plants that help increase productivity of the plant. And that's a really exciting field.
That sounds fascinating. Did you have any help from the outside, or is it your science teacher, just you? How did you do it?
I got some help from my science teachers and everything, but a lot of it is focused on independent science research, and they've really supported us on how to do research and on the first year, and then the second year, how to really conduct a successful experiment. It was definitely a journey. There were a lot of points where it did get really hard, and I wasn't really sure what I was doing or where I was going. I wasn't really an expert in that field, but just the more research and the more time and effort you put into it, it really does pay off. And I was really finding that towards the end, and now I'm really grasping a lot of these topics about soil science and sustainable agriculture, and it makes me really excited to be able to engage with all of that.
And did you find something you can share with us?
I mean, I think it's all interesting, so that's just one thing.
Any conclusions you can share from that
My
research?
studies were sort of inconclusive for various reasons, a lot of it having to do with timing and just more technical issues I wasn't able to get done. But I'm trying to see if these two bacteria can work together to promote these two different plant growth promoting qualities in order to increase productivity. And I think that's really exciting because these bacteria and their different respective abilities that enhance plant growth and crop productivity would be really great because they could act as what is called biofertilizers, which are organic and biological fertilizers,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes actual living organisms, which would replace all these like synthetic artificial fertilizers that are used in mass amounts, which have a lot of different detrimental effects on soil health and crop productivity in the long run. And I could talk a lot about that, but I'm not sure how much detail you want to go into, but that's sort of what I'm hoping to be able to get to.
Okay. And if we have listeners that are amateur foresters or amateur gardeners that want to improve their soil, what would you suggest to them based on what you've found?
Synthetic fertilizers feed the plant, but organic fertilizers feed the soil. And there's really that difference between feeding the plant and feeding the soil because plants take up many different macro and micronutrients. And the main ones are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So all these big fertilizers, like these urea fertilizers, these little pellets that you see people put in their soil or they spray all over their plants or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
it's mainly nitrogen, sometimes phosphorus and potassium. And what that does, if there's too much nitrogen, it's going to disrupt the balance of the nitrogen cycle and the cycling of all the different chemicals and nutrients in your soil. And it's just going to go to the plant. The plant is going to become dependent on that fertilizer you use, and it's not going to get what it needs from the soil because the soil is no longer providing it. Instead, I would say make sure you're also feeding your soil. So use organic fertilizers that have many different components and contain these different nutrients that will, you're sure, aren't just feeding the plant, but are just making sure that the soil has the nutrients to be able to sustain the plant on its own.
I would also say try to do your own compost
Yeah, for
because,
sure.
right, when you do that, you're able to feed your soil.
Food waste is such a huge problem, especially in our country, and it has a lot of different climate warming potential because it releases different gases such as methane, which has warming potential that's much higher than carbon dioxide, which is, the big gas that everyone talks about that's like warming the
Mm-hmm.
planet. So to be able to like directly disrupt that is really rewarding, and to put it back into the soil in your backyard or wherever you're planting your garden to make sure that that is still staying healthy is also a really rewarding experience. So I totally agree with you.
And there was another paper you were writing. This is not just one about the sustainable agriculture. You also were writing something about the environmental justice.
Yeah, I mean, I try to do this all the time to incorporate my passion for environment and sustainable development into whatever I do. So it was really fun for me to be writing these two separate papers. One was the one I just talked about for my science research class, very grounded in the natural sciences and agronomy and agriculture. And then one was for my American history English class. And we were writing this huge final paper on a topic of our choice. And I was knew I wanted to do something about environment, and I wasn't really sure what. And then environmental justice really stuck out to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that there was actually a huge amount on environmental justice, and that the environmental movement was mainly started by Black and Indigenous people. So there's, even though sometimes the environmental movement can seem sort of whitewashed in mainstream media, it has a huge history in different groups and different people of color that I found really interesting. And then also the environmental inequity issues are so tied or in our society. And my paper really focused specifically on Indigenous Americans in this country and how they're affected by environmental racism and environmental inequity. A lot about toxic waste specifically,
Mm-hmm.
like where does our toxic waste go, and how do people decide, and how does the government decide where they're gonna mine uranium or where they're gonna put a dam or where they're gonna put a power plant. They usually decide to put them near marginalized people or near communities like different indigenous communities, or they decide to create a food desert, which is basically where you're not able to really grow productive crops that are able to be nutritious and feed you. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of those food deserts are in these marginalized communities or in these indigenous nations.
Mm-hmm. Very sad, but very true.
It's no coincidence or anything. It's really, the more research you do into it, you find that these big corporations and companies and the government sort of work together to really put these other communities at a disadvantage. even though these communities are able to bounce back and be resilient, you can
Right.
see that there's a clear method to our society where there's like clear cut inequity drawn. So I was really interested in exploring that and then finding solutions that would be able to address environmental problems and address social problems and move forward to create sort of a circle of like restorative justice.
What are some of the solution you came up with?
It's sort of my like life goal to be able to work on these solutions that not only address the environment but also address like societal issues and
Mm-hmm.
find the intersection between them to be able to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
It's less of a solution that I have right now and more of just a mindset of being able to recognize the intersections, like just exploring the interdisciplinary aspects of environmentalism and the many intersections it has throughout our
Mm-hmm.
society and throughout the global society. Moving forward and committing to sustainable development and restoring our environment, but at the same time making sure no one is left behind and
Mm-hmm.
people who have like historically been a little more disadvantaged than other people get their restorative justice and equity within these solutions that are going to move ourselves forward. For example, when people talk about the Green New Deal, like I think that's a really great idea to be able to shift our economy towards renewable and green solutions, but at the same time we need to make sure that those solutions and like affect and benefit everyone and also push for sustainable equitable development. And when someone talks about urban environmental policy and city planning, when you want to put a new public green space or you want to have a new line of public transportation that's clean and renewable, you have to make sure that the already existing sort of divides and inequities and legacies of different societal injustices that exist in that city, that those new green spaces or those new modes of transportation are serving everyone and it's participating in restorative justice to make access for this new great like renewable solution for everyone, if that makes sense.
It does. I actually want to quote Robert Bullard, who, if it doesn't know who he is, he was considered the father of environmental justice. And I'm quoting him saying, it's the principle that all people are entitled to equal environmental protection, regardless of race, color, or national origin. It is the right to live and work and play in clean environment. So that exactly goes to what you're saying. And I know in the 1990s, there were 17 principles of environmental justice were defined. And one of them is actually calling for education of present and future generations with the emphasis on social and environmental issues. And I actually appreciate that your school allowed you to do that research and brought it up to the front so you were able to decide that, okay, I'm going to take it to the next level. I'm going to do something about it, whether it's right now or my plan as I finish, as I graduate. It's really great. Do you know if your school is doing it for the entire everybody's doing it at the school, or is it something that you were just passionate about and the teachers just went with you?
It was more independent. It was for this one specific class, and everyone at the end of the class writes this really big research paper that's about anything in in America or in American history.
You're not just sitting on your hands. You try to figure out how do you educate your people close to you on sustainability or recycling or even picking up trash, right?
Definitely. Since everything like happened and I've just been like at home a lot and unable to see a lot of people, what a lot of people are using is social media. I don't have a huge social media presence or anything, but the people that do follow me, I try to put things on my story, little things, and sometimes I add comments along, and hopefully, I hope one or two people look at them or read through them. Sometimes people swipe up and talk to me about it, which is really great. So that's one way, and then also just through my club at school, which is the environmental club, but we renamed it Environmental Action Team because we really wanted to focus on taking actionable steps towards environment and sustainability that I co-lead with my friend. And we focus on a lot of different aspects and issues, and we'll give announcements every morning meeting to make sure people are still engaged. We try to tell people how to compost correctly and how to recycle correctly, and I'm always like just bugging my friends. I'm like, no, you can't recycle that. No, you have to like wash this out before you recycle it. Just talking about those different things, just a little naggy at some points, but I just try to like make it click, and then sometimes it does, and it's really exciting, and I'm like, oh my god, you remembered when I told you like not to put it in the trash or something.
You see, that's another example of a butterfly effect. It's your small action.
Yeah.
You never know what's gonna happen, and don't stop nagging. It's it's important. And the club you mentioned, was it the club you started with your friend?
It was an already existing club at my school, but we sort of renamed it, and we were trying to like, I don't know, in a way like revamp it, because it's not really the most known club, and it's probably not the most popular club at my school. Despite that, we got a lot done.
And you were recently approached by FXB, a climate advocate, and it's a program which serves to inform and empower and mobilize youth just like you to act on climate emergency. What exactly are you doing with them?
FXB gave us a lot of like resources. We were able to hear from many different speakers and engage with them personally, which was really great. Like these speakers I'd never really think about seeing outside of that, and they just sort of were presented to us on a Zoom call, and we were able to see them.
Climate experts?
Yeah,
What type
climate
of?
experts, people who work in sustainability. We heard from someone from the Nature Conservancy about water. We heard from someone from something called the Tessa Collective about building, and he builds board games and he's committed to sustainability, but he was making one about sustainable cities. We got to see this avenue of climate and sustainability that you might not always think of, and which was like intersecting it with making a board game. And it really showed us how no matter what your interest is, you can still make it relate to climate or to environment or to sustainability. And then other things that we're doing, well, I had the opportunity to partner with the Years Project to submit a blog post that I wrote about something of my choice. It was supposed to be like a personal narrative about climate and how it related to me. And it was really cool. Like, those are different ways, like, really, the network that FXB has been able to get us where to different really interesting places, and we're really starting to branch out. We were really New York based for a minute, and then we started branching out like all over now. Like we get new members all the time, which is really exciting.
It is exciting, and it's very hopeful, because if you say the school is not pushing towards anything with sustainability and environmental education, you care enough for making a change, and you are getting people with the same bug, and even if it's 6 people at the club, and then slowly more with FXB. So we know there is hope, even though not many people currently following you, but hopefully you won't give up and they will start doing that.
Yeah.
So
I hope.
listen, those things are not easy, and you're gonna come up with people that will tell you that it's a waste of time, and yes, you can grow your tomatoes, but it's gonna be enough for one meal, so you still need to. But there are ways to do other things. Um,
Yeah.
so it's very, very, very important. Any advice you want to give to kids that are listening?
I think I have like two things to say. Don't be like nihilistic. Like a lot of people my age are sort of, oh, like the world's gonna end. Like there's nothing I can do about it. This and that, all this or whatever. And in some sense, it is kind of discouraging, because when you look at the facts, there's like a few major companies that really just like wreck the environment and the climate, and a few governments and a few companies that really are just the most responsible for these huge catastrophes that we see on the news. So it can feel that way, but individual action does have an impact. If you choose to recycle properly or you choose to compost, it's not like that's doing nothing or doing something bad or detrimental. So don't lose hope in individual action, because, for example, if everyone stopped using plastic bottles, sure, there would be a still huge amount of problems with major companies and oil spills and major companies and fossil fuel emissions, but there would be like so much less plastic pollution, for example, in the ocean if these individual consumer choices were made.
Hmm.
And it's not solving all these huge problems immediately, but it's not doing nothing. And it's that sort of idea and those principles that are really important. And if you uphold those principles, then there might start to be sort of a cultural change. We don't just need like legislative and policy change. I think it's important to have a cultural change where it becomes a part of our culture to understand a restorative circle and to understand a circular economy and a sustainable economy and a sustainable society as well. And once
Hmm.
we start having that mindset more collectively, then that's when a lot more of these changes will come easier and people will recognize that these huge companies that are so responsible for all these different catastrophes and crises, they'll start to realize, well, this is such a much more huge deal than I thought before because of that sort of cultural change. And then they'll say, we need to have this policy change, this legislative change, and this economic change. And then also just remember that this can relate to any of your passions. Whatever you're passionate about, there is a sustainability or a climate angle. So if you're worried, well, like, I don't really care about like conservation, or I'm not really someone who wants to go and weed, or someone who wants to like make my own compost or something. No matter what you're interested in, if you just sort of search that and then sustainability, you can find an angle where you can help out with whatever you plan to do or whatever you would like to do. And then one more thing, don't focus on perfectionism because you're just going to lose yourself if you do that. Addressing climate in your daily life in every single way, because you're just going to lose yourself and just get really frustrated and really upset. And then that'll lead to the nihilism that I said is so dangerous. Just do little things and just do your best and just encourage other people to do your best and think about like little different ways that you can start to change your lifestyle and then change that and then move on to another aspect. And then if it becomes too much, it's okay. Like you don't have to do everything. You need to just also encourage other people to do their part as well. Like it's really a collective community based issue and everything. And just building that sort of community is really important. Like it's not all like individual, like life or death, like everything is on you and like you have to do your part. Like it's really important to reach out to others and build a bigger community sense around these sort of issues because they're community based issues. Like the environment and ecology and sustainability is all based in some way around sort of community issues. Like environment is about a group of different things and how they interact with each other. So I'd say like don't get lost in those little individual mishaps or something, if that makes sense.
No, it does, and I appreciate you say that. So one thing that when I speak with kids, one thing that I hear back is, "You made that problem for me, and now you want me to fix it for you. Why?" So I always go back and I say, "Okay, so great. I'm trying, right? With 1 trillion, we are planting the planet, and that's mitigating the problem. But I can't do it alone. And I need you to help me, even though I was the one messing up. I mean, my generation, right? I still need you to buy in. I still need you to, as you say, don't buy the plastic bottle. Uh, don't get everything that you just see. Do something small." So, what would you say to those people if what I said was not convincing enough?
It's sort of, in a way, it is a generational thing because the generation older than us created sort of systems that weren't healthy for the planet or anything. But it's also not an entire like generation's fault. Like I said, the most major climate issues and catastrophes are made by huge corporations and governments that control massive amounts of oil reserves or massive amounts of fracking industry or something like that. And those companies that are so powerful are able to control so much that they can get away with continuing to do that. So I think it's less like when someone like you, for example, who you're trying to make a difference and with the trillion trees, and you're reaching out, asking someone younger for help, and they say, well, you created this mess. I mean, in part, it's a generational thing, but like, I think that that's not a fair point because those huge catastrophes that I think my generation cites as like the biggest problems are created by big, like like governments and created by big corporations. So blaming the individual isn't really gonna like get us anywhere. I think, like you said, like, okay, I need your help and let's be accountable for each other. Like, just important right now to recognize the issue and just move forward. You're not gonna get anywhere by just being like, well, you fix it. Like, okay, yeah, like it's not fair that we have to like be born into a world with all these problems and everything, but what is that going to do if you're just sort of upset about it? And I mean, it's okay to be upset and like give yourself space for that, but at the same time, if you want change, you have to go move forward a little bit and try to actually be a part of that change if you want to do that. And if you care so much that you're blaming someone else for these problems, then why wouldn't you want to work together with that person to be able to push forward? And then if enough individuals get together and start having these ideas, you can start attacking those bigger issues, because power of a collective is much stronger to be able to address those issues and lobby for different environmental policy and everything. So I just think that it's just not like productive to have that mindset. And if you really want change, it's important to keep in mind that community and keep in mind the idea of just working together for a common goal.
Yes, and as a community, you can just avoid purchasing or interacting with companies that you know are harming the environment. And if you're old enough, go vote for somebody that cares for the environment. So that those are two tools we can use our power as consumers and use our power as democratic power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And then you can start to really dismantle unproductive systems that aren't working and really be critical of how is our economy set up, or why do these companies have so much power that they're able to get away with all this crazy environmental like degradation and catastrophe. And if it's just me and I'm just sitting here thinking like, oh, that sucks, like these companies should not have this much power, then I mean that's really not going to do anything. So you, like you said, you need to build community, because once a lot of people really start to think that, then you can start moving towards something. And if a huge community starts not buying from this company or starts supporting locally and sustainably, and that's going to have such much more of an impact than if you just someone like asks you to help them out and you say, well, no, this is your problem. Like, just work together to find like a common solution.
By the way, who got you infected with the bug of trees and nature?
I don't know, I just find a lot of comfort in nature and everything, and just like my local green spaces that I'm able to go to are like places that are really close to home for me. And I just thought, no matter like what else is going on in my life, like at least have these like areas, like these natural areas where I really feel connected and comfortable. And then I realized, well, like all of these different issues and like the climate crisis and like all of that is like threatening to like take like that one like really comfortable place away. Like, and I was like, wow, that's like really not okay. And I don't know, that sort of got me going too, where I was like, those like places of comfort, like I was like, are in a way like under attack, and it sort of made me feel that way in a personal connection. And then it just like sprung off into all these different issues, and like here I am with sustainable agriculture and environmental justice.
Well, I'm happy that you are where you are, and I can't wait to see where this is going to take you and all the amazing things you're going to do for this planet. By the way, what is your favorite tree?
I mean, I just have to like be classic and be like oak, because it's just like the trees that are around me and I really love them. But also, I've been to like sort of the South and New Orleans specifically, and they have these trees down there like are covered in like Spanish moss, and like they have these really great branches, and they're really like pretty trees. And I like actually asked my teacher, I was like, what tree is this actually? Because he was a science teacher. He was like, I don't know. And then he looked it up, and it was called live southern oak. So like I really like that tree, but then I was thinking also like around the trees that are around me that sort of like are comforting and remind me of home are also the oak. So I think just like if I had to say oak.
I really want to thank you for joining me today and for everything that you're doing.
Thank you
And
so much for having me on here. It was a really great conversation and experience, and thank you again for like this opportunity to be a part of this.
And thank you everyone for joining me today. We are all beautiful butterflies, each in his and her individual ways. I wanted to thank you for joining me today in this episode. I really appreciate you coming on this journey with me, and I hope you can join me next time. And remember, it only takes a small action to make a big difference. Be a butterfly.
And that's all for this episode. Thank you for joining us today. Please subscribe to hear more of our stories of change.